Hi, this is Cherie. Welcome to my journey. And today, we gonna start calling Thursday Take the Trash Out Thursday. Okay? Take the trash out Thursday. So, I've been sitting up here trying to figure out, what the hell is wrong with these damn females out here. Okay? So, I'm gonna tell you something. The times that, I have had problems with my girls have always been because of their friends, male or females. Because believe me, yeah. Okay, hold on. So, I've been watching my daughter's cats. Okay, and I'm sending a picture, showing that the cats are doing fine and they liking it upstairs, and and I get a call from her this morning and she upsets me, right? She tells me that she was traumatized. I'm like, okay, y'all was traumatized by what? Well, she was traumatized because I'm going to tell you what happened in my situation. What happened in my situation is I had a narcissist, possessive, controlling Taurus who thought that he was going to come and take over my house and tell me how to live my life and take over my finances and my possessions and triangulate my family and friends against me. Did he do it? Yeah, he managed to do it. Right? Because when I'm trying to tell my family, listen, I need to protect you. We need to bond together and feel that we can trust one another, right? And they were like, no, you over exaggerating, you doing too much, you don't know what you're talking about, you're insane, not insane. I'm like, not insane. And they're like, well, what we really mean is that you just exaggerating. And I'm like, no, this is real life. This is real life. Right? They don't seem to understand that men don't cooperate all the time. Most of the time, they don't cooperate. The only time men cooperate is when they're getting their way. And how is that even considered cooperation? If they're getting their way, how is it considered their cooperation, that they're cooperating? So, we had got to a point where I'm trying to tell, I'm trying to tell these girls of mine that, listen, as a girl, the law does not work in your favor, right? They sit up here and they watch how these men, they can get charged, criminal charges and all. They get a slap on the wrist, or they get, probation, or they just pay a fine, and because the behavior happens so much amongst the males, they just don't have enough room to put all of these males in jail, okay, or prison. So, but however, when it comes to women, there is room, okay, because there's not enough women out here who, are facing criminal charges. And they're not facing criminal charges because the men are taking care of them. That is not what I'm saying. They just refuse to bend their integrity to do things that will force them to be facing criminal charges and put into positions that will make them vulnerable to outside elements. Right now, the average woman, she doesn't know that, life is very unfair in a world that's ran by men. Okay? So let's say I listened to my dad, right? I listened to my dad, and my dad said, he didn't like being he was a black man born into a white man's world. I say, I don't like being a woman born in a man's world. Okay? Because we not only suffer what the men suffer because of our relationship with other men, whether it be our fathers, our sons, our husbands, or our brothers. We suffer with them. Okay? We suffer with them. Because if they're suffering, they're always punching down on women. Right? They always flexing on somebody weaker than themselves just so that they can feel strong. All right? Now, I was sitting up here listening to Carl Jung talk about how men love, right? And they love based off of who they're the type of woman that they're attracted to, which in common language, that is, you're either attracted to a mother figure, somebody that's going to nurture you like you was their son, right? Or, you're attracted to, your daughter, right? A daughter relationship. That's somebody who, you want to protect, somebody that you want to support, somebody that reminds you of yourself, that you love like yourself, right? Or like your sister, right? Somebody that you see kind of as your equal, right? And a lot of times that's problematic because if a man, sees you like his sister, you can kind of think that, that's a good place to be because it seems equitable until, next thing you know, he wants to get into a sparring match with you. Or, they could see you as wife material. A lot of them don't even know what wife material means because even if they knew what wife material means, they still have to have it conceived in context of them being the husband. Most men, they don't even have a concept of them being a husband, except what? That they come home that they come home at night and they go to work during the day or whenever they can go to work. Because not everybody, especially minorities, can go to work during the day. Most of those positions, they're held for people who, are in the super tribe. And the super tribe has control who goes to work wherever. All right? Let's just keep it real. It's the super tribe. So, I was listening to Carl Jung say that, right? But what I agree with was that, yes, it is those 4 factors. But what I disagree with is that what he said was, it wasn't the fact that men love these women because it's a compatibility. He said that the men love these women to complete them to being more in love with themselves. And that's where my mind just went outside of itself. Okay? Yeah, you're going to have to talk to the engineers about how that road was constructed and why you thought you can make a left turn in that lane that tapered off to nothing. So yeah, then she tried to say that she was traumatized. And I'm thinking back, oh, you was traumatized, right? And I'm like, okay, this must be in the time when they refused to listen to me, right? My daughter, my oldest daughter, was having financial difficulties, and her and her kids, came to stay with me, right? And what she didn't do was she didn't honor me as a parent. Now, why she didn't honor me as a parent? Well, she didn't honor me as a parent because she definitely had been triangulated, right? She definitely had been triangulated with this guy that wanted to be her adopted father without going through the adoption agencies. First of all, right? I know that my father totally disagreed. My father said, you would regret it. I was like, yeah, I might regret it, but I said, but as it stands right now, I really need help, taking care of her because, I'm not making it. Right? So then, hindsight, this guy says, well, he knew that he would have me in line by controlling me through the control of my daughter. But I told him, I said, you're not going to control me by controlling my daughter. And he just smiled and laughed like he was clever. Now, he was actually a Capricorn. Okay, he was actually a Capricorn, but he was an ascendant Taurus. And this was the 33 degree Mason, who was also part of the Manosphere patriarchy, right? The men who wanted to be revered just because they have dick and balls, period. Right? That's the type of man that will want you to praise him because he sent you a dick pic. Okay? Now, and the reason why he feels that way is because, number one, he was, revered by other men, because other men, had smaller prints than him, right? They was averaging probably about 6, 7, 8 inches. This man was in the 10 to 12 inches. Okay? And so this whole manosphere is revolving around the phallic. That where these men will have admiration for these other men, not realizing that these other men will put these men under their control. Right? They have two faces. On one face, they pretend like they're the best man for a woman, to the woman. Right? To a man, they will tell these men that they should be respected by them because technically, they can ruin a woman that they might want and need, and they'll give them a woman. I want you to think really hard about that. Right? That's where a man would be like, yeah, I'll bust open every orifice on her body and she'll be a vessel for you so you won't be lonely. You might not be able to control her, but number one, with your little bitty ditty little bitty ditty dick, you would not be able to control her anyway. But as an empty vessel, you can control this woman, right? If she has poor self-esteem, if she don't know, her right hand from her left hand, yeah, she's uneducated, and you don't let her know what's going on in the world, and the world is confusing her, yeah, she'll run to you for at least some comfortability, because women have to have at least a little bit of comfortability. Otherwise, you know, they'll throw themselves off a cliff. So as you get older, you know, you start seeing the type of treatment that men will enact towards women. And more women are starting to see that. When they're young, they're like, oh, I thought this is how it's supposed to go. And it seems like that's the way it's supposed to go. But then we're starting to see the trend that, well, there are some men who, I mean, damn, if you could be Halle Berry and still be mistreated by an ugly man, I mean, how bad is it for women in this world, right? Halle Berry, remember her as Catwoman? Damn, she was fine, right? She didn't have a lick of fat that didn't belong there. Okay? And she had a beautiful face, and she was talented, and etc., etc., etc. And we've seen this happen over and over. Toni Braxton, happened to her, right? Maya, it happened to her, right? Serena Williams, it happened to her. All these women are, for whatever reason, even though they achieved a lot by themselves, they get defeated by men who are jealous of women, right? And this is where women have to understand that you cannot be disloyal to womanhood. Even if you don't believe in the matriarchy, you should still not be disloyal to womanhood. Why? Because you're a woman. If you sit up here and tell me that you're a fucking tomboy, and then next week you get slapped in the face by a man, you know, and you don't understand, you know, how come you was on their side all of this time, and they treating you, and they slapping you around, and, you know, talking about, yeah, you know, you said you wanted to be one of the boys. Right? And I'm saying that specifically to you women out here who thought, oh, being part of the gang was going to be cool because they needed to have women in there. No, they don't. They've been busting each other's asses for a long time. Right? And you'll know that as soon as they flip your ass over and they want it from the back. They don't, pussy ain't nothing but a thing to them. Okay? So, my thought is once the pussy becomes nothing but a thing to a man, he might as well be gay. And that women should leave them alone. Don't get into a relationship with them. You know, even having them in your proximity is probably going to ruin your energy. Going to give you bad luck. All right? Now, getting back to what I was talking about, my daughter, who is now 28 years old, is talking about being traumatized about something that happened to her when she was 16 years old. And I can't figure out why she hasn't went to counseling for that. She says she's over it some days, and other days, here it is, even today, she was like, no, you traumatized us, right? And I'm like, no, y'all traumatized me, because I'm telling you, I'm at war with a triad borderline Machiavelli voodoo witch doctor that y'all don't even understand what the fuck that means. And y'all are not understanding how you can be vulnerable, how you can lose your life. Because when a motherfucker wants to take me out, believe me, if taking out my kids is presented as an opportunity, they would do that too. We hear it all the time. Right? How these motherfuckers get so mad at people, they want to take out their whole fucking bloodline. Right? And then they're like, no. You know, people don't get that mad. People don't get that mad. And it's like, how do you think that doesn't happen? Right? And still believe and see war on our national TV. Do you know how many bloodlines get taken out in war? Anyway, let me go in here and see how much this medication is going to cost me. Hold on. So here's the thing. When I have to sit up here and fight with my damn kids, what they're telling me is they don't respect me as their mother. First of all, no kid should be fighting their fucking parents. Period. But when you fight your parents to bond with another sibling, which is probably a half-breed sibling, or to bond with a man or some of your fucking friends, you chose your alliance. And so I'm saying to myself, I know you chose your alliance. I know you were stupid to choose that alliance. So what I ended up telling her, I said, look, you know, I got a lot of spiritual things going on. And, you know, so we arguing back and forth. Oh, this is so cute. Look at this. This is cute. It's $26. But that is cute. Then you got a cheaper version over here. I'm sure it's got to be cheaper. $24. $2 cheaper? Anyway. So, I ended up telling my daughter, I said, look, you know, I am not a domestic type of person. I've always it's like a little rumple. I told her, I said, I've always worked outside, right? Never spent a lot of time doing domestic stuff. I did the minimum domestic things. And so she's like, well, all you have to do is just do the domestic things and just start feeling better. And I'm like, listen, you know, she don't even understand how sometimes, you know, I get tired of hearing her mouth, right? Because if the house was never clean, it would be a lot worse than it is now, right? I'm just saying, I don't like to clean the house, period, right? So she ain't understanding that this whole thing is me leading up to me saying that I've been checking online and I start finding out that if I go overseas, I can get a place Yeah. That I can get a place and also get a housekeeper for a lot less than what it would cost me to live here. Right? And I've been checking it out. And I told her, I said, there is a lot of seniors who have decided, to leave the country just because of that. Right? Because, you're stuck in a situation where you have to make the money, you have to do the shopping, you have to clean the house, you have to counsel everybody, be the rock. For what? For what? For no appreciation? Where they do that at? Okay? So then, she starts getting on my case talking about, how dare you? How dare you leave your native land to go live abroad? Yeah, she escalated my anger talking like that to me. So now I start telling her about the lack of appreciation. Then she didn't want to hear about it. Right? Because I'm trying to put her into a hypothetical situation that she know nothing about because of her developmental level of achievement of only being in her 20s. A woman 20s, they're still trying to make her feel like she's still a commodity to this earth. Right? But when you get into your 30s, it lessens. It's not as much. I see a basket over here. Then when you're in your 40s, it's even less. You might not have any depending on your skills. And if you was in a whole dysfunctional situation, you don't even have, a family. Because the whole family because the whole family is dissolved and disunited. Right? Where here you are thinking that the whole fucking struggle was, well, at least you'll have your grandbabies. So now we have senior citizens who are estranged from their fucking grandkids. Why? Because of the partnerships that they chose to be in. I'm gonna get 1%. Right? They chose these damn partnerships that alienated them from their mama first, right? Because their mama was like, don't get with that guy. He ain't gonna marry you. He's just gonna cause, you do have these illegitimate children, and we're just gonna be a feuding family. Right? So they're like, no, he's sitting up here telling her, your mama she's a bitter bitch because her relationship didn't work out. As if she is not a connoisseur of what makes relationships don't work out, okay? Because a lot of people will say, well, how do you know unless you went through it? And these single parents are out here saying, yeah, they're experts. They are experts. Right? So, she's still lost in the sauce, right? My 40-year-old daughter, she done hit a realization that life ain't what she thought it was, right? When she called me crying, talking about, Mama, how come I've been with this man for 10 years and he don't want to get married? And I'm telling her, I don't know. Maybe it was his upbringing. Maybe it was just him being in this devilish mood. Or maybe he's just fucking retarded. I don't know. And the reason why I'm saying that is because she had his baby, right? So, do I know this little child? That's my grandbaby? No, I don't even know her. So this dude at the cash register had the nerve to ask me, how you doing? I said, how you doing? He said he was doing fine and asked me again, how was I doing? So I'm like, I'm a little pissed off. Right? I'm a little pissed off when I got to decide, do I pay my bills or do I buy my medication? That's what pisses me off. And he was like, yeah, I understand. Because right now, I'm buying some food. I'm like, medicine is a fucking luxury. And did I tell you that they automatically taking out $202 for my Medicare? Yeah. So that's a reduction in my disposable income. And here's the thing, right? And some men will say, well, you know, you deserve that because you couldn't be a submissive wife. I'm like, you know, fuck you and go fuck yourself. Because the type of submission that y'all had asked for was killing me. And it was definitely over after the STD. So, you know, that was a fucking eye-opener for me to sit up there and say, nah, you know, I may not like this life, but I ain't gonna be no fucking sacrifice for an asshole motherfucker who don't know what life is all about. And has no love. When you have no love, don't matter if you're a man or a woman, when you have no love, you have no God in you. Okay? You have no God in you. And you could say, well, you sound like you don't have no love. I do have love. I have enough love to sit up here and explain to you what the fuck is really going on. Right? Explain to you that this estrangement with the grandparents, with the parents, y'all fucked up. This sitting up here thinking that, you know, you didn't breeded you a tribe of warriors. I'll say it again. God is not about war. First of all, God don't have to fight. God will defeat your ass without even trying. All right? And we all know man is the devil, man is Satan, and man is Lucifer. That's all man. That ain't got shit to do with anything that could ever oppose and beat God, which is God. God is what? God is love. They taught you that when you was 3 years old. Okay. So, we have taken out the trash this Thursday. And I know y'all you ain't gonna like what I had to say. I didn't like having to say it. Okay? But number one, honor your elders. Right? Especially if your elders are in union. Second, and I don't mean in union in that your elders, you know, are being subordinate to, you know, a controlling, you know, tyrannical man. No, use your fucking discernment. All right? Just because your mom was, you know, willing to be enslaved for 50 years, you know, and when after your daddy dies, you know, she finally can say that her worst mistake was marrying your daddy. And y'all are like shocked and surprised, like, we didn't know. Y'all didn't want to know. And that's another slap to your mama and your grandmama, because they're like, not only did you guys didn't know, you didn't want to know, and you never knew who your mama and your grandma was. You never knew. You didn't care. You had that same callous effect that you thought was appropriate. Right? And so, getting back to what one of the things, the point that my daughter was making was that she was like, oh, well, you know, you should be wanting to fight for your country. This is your country. You're an indigenous. And I told her, I said, you know, I wanted to tell her that, look, you know, in this society, you had to have something to fight for, first of all. Right? And I know why the Indian man is on the extinction list, right? Because they were very egotistical too. And they were egotistical and weak. I don't know how you can be both at the same time, but yeah. Because, you know, in my perspective, you have to be strong in order to be egotistical. But when you egotistical and weak, you just a dumbass. Right? And who's following in their footsteps? These black men, These black men are following right in the steps of the indigenous Indians, who also were dumbasses and had the audacity to be egotistical. We're going to be taken out. Why fight for them? Why? I don't see it.